was a joint effort by NTUA and IDT. NTUA researched the academic resources subdomain and the social platform subdomain, and IDT was responsible for the policies one. The point is that as opposed to the other domains, the environmental domain impact assessment is usually done through a very formal and very well regulated process, which is called EIA. It's been regulated by the EU ever since 1985, and we're currently following the directives issued in 2011 and later amended in 2014. Of course, there are other methods as well, but not as formal as this one. It's been adopted by all member states, and in all EU member states, there exist laws that regulate this formal process individually. So EIA regards mostly projects, as opposed to SCA, which was later established in 2001 to regulate the cumulative effects of projects, and therefore deals with the environmental impact assessment at a regional scale. EIA and SCA both have very distinct stages, starting from screening to scoping to mitigation, the constitution of the actual report, and the review process and the decision-making process. During our research, we've investigated the role of cultural heritage in EIA and SCA. And as it turns out, it's only a small fraction of an appendix of the two directives, where it is mentioned that for projects that are related to landscapes and sites of historical, cultural, or archaeological significance, as you can see on the slide, it is only optional for member states to choose to perform an EIA. So it's not mandatory, as so happens with other types of projects. Now, our research expanded into 4 different fields. According to SoPHIA's objectives, we had to investigate the trends, the current trends in the discourse about the environmental impact assessment, the gaps and opportunities, of course, that arise, and also dig into policies that are related to EIA objectives. But as this session is about gaps, let's focus on this area of the chart. Now, as so happens with other domains as well, there are some main issues that are common to all domains, as we found out, which have to do with either the inherent weaknesses of the processes, the impact assessment processes, or with 2 other main categories of gaps, which is the indeterminacy of a cultural heritage clear definition and the lack of active public involvement in decision-making processes. Because of the fact that EIA is formal, we consider the 2 to be a part of the innate weaknesses of the process that we have at hand. So let's look at that a bit more closely. As far as the innate EIA weaknesses are concerned, we found out that because of this not mandatory role, of cultural heritage, the quality criteria are not clearly defined. And therefore, when an EIA regards an intervention or an event of a cultural heritage relation, there are no indicators that can assess the impact it will have environmentally. What is more is that EIA scope is set according to the developer, so it's commissioned, the report is usually commissioned by the developer and therefore directed towards his or her interests. There's also uncertainty as to who should be involved. The directives, both directives, describe that the public should be involved at least after the scoping stage or during the scoping stage, which is the second stage of the process. But it's not very clear how to integrate the stakeholders into a general discussion. This usually happens in an informative way rather than actively engaging them into the discourse. So the nature of the report also ends up touching more domains than just the environmental one. We've come to reports that usually describe the economic and the social benefits instead of the environmental ones, arguing for the project because of its because it's economically prosperous or it adds to the social cohesion. But it's very rare to bump into reports that actually describe the environmental benefits of such proposals. And of course, despite the fact that there is an SCA process that's also regulated, the relation between EIA and SCA remains unexplored or underexplored. As far as the second stream of shortcomings is concerned, these are related to the lack of a clear definition of what cultural heritage is. And this also happens because the preservation discourse often obscures the heritage planning discourse. There is a conservationist, still a very strong conservationist approach that somehow impedes the progressing to another understanding of things, which is more instrumental perhaps. Historic properties therefore are considered to be more important. There also exist multiple understandings for the same things. You can, in the reference list, we found out that different authors relate to some terms in completely different ways. And that leads to a lack of clarity in planning and assessment, of course. Ultimately, what this uncertainty does is that it makes cultural heritage play a very minor role in the decision-making process. Ultimately, it's all attributed to economic prosperity and social cohesion, in a sense. Finally, these are the stream of shortcomings related to the lack of public consultation. As I've mentioned before, the process is regulated by the EU, but every member state decides for itself on how to proceed, especially for the Annex 2 of the regulation, which describes the optional projects, the projects which are optionally subject to EIAs. So in most member states, public participation is mandated at specific stages, but there exist cases where the potential for public mobilization, discursive engagement, and action may be very limited. We've also encountered cases where not creating consensus has led to phenomena of contention, and therefore authors do advocate for strong public consensus before the implementation of any project. Lack of consensus is not only harmful to the EIA process, but also to project sustainability. It can lead to people jeopardizing the project upon its implementation. And that about concludes what the environmental domain has retrieved during our research. Thank you very much.